Can you think of any entrepreneur that has done more to save our country than Mike Lindell? I mean, this guy was thrown out of all the Bed Bath and Beyond and retail outlets because he's been standing up for Trump and for us. So let's support him as well. Look in the link in the description below to support. Make sure you use the AMP promo code to save some money. Well, Leigh Dundas began her career representing Fortune 500 companies in high-stakes courtroom battles, and then transitioned over the last decade into combating child sex slavery in third world countries. In March of 2020, she took the lessons she learned fighting large mafias and criminal syndicates in the human trafficking realm and began combating an even greater threat, a second Holocaust designed to eradicate our very humanity and crush anyone who would dare speak against it. Let's welcome Leigh Dundas to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yes, you bet. You're really at the tip of the spear here, partnering with Robert Kennedy Jr., Lynn Wood, America's Frontline Doctors. Tell us about these organizations and people you're working with and what the main goal is here.
Well, a few weeks ago, we saw our administration, I'll just leave it at that, come out with what was essentially a fake mandate. They said, everybody who works at any employer over X number of employees or in these sectors needs to get vaccinated. It's a mandate. It was, of course, not a mandate. It was essentially a press release, but the press hyped it so much that, reality is becoming perception, or perception is becoming reality, whatever the saying is there. And all the lawyers I know, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, or somewhere in between, can look at this and say this is never going to hold water. It's not constitutional. OSHA's emergency procedures were never designed to issue rules concerning a virus. OSHA is designed to effectuate workplace safety, and a virus in your body, which anybody from Finland to Sweden to China to San Luis Obispo can get, is not a unique environmental hazard that's unique to American workplaces. So they really don't have any jurisdiction. We can all see the writing on the wall, but for the average American worker, they just hear the word mandate. They have their employer saying you have to go get this vaccine, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, I need to race out and go do this if I want to keep my job. But I am here to tell you that many, many employees are not okay with this, and all of the lawyers out in front and all of the organizations that have been really leading the charge over the last 18 months to hold back the tide of tyranny are saying the same things. We're like, hey, hold the line. Don't necessarily bow down to tyranny if you don't want to, of your own accord, and you need to give the lawyers some time to get out in front of this, to file these suits. But what we're seeing over the last couple of weeks, unfortunately, Sean, in many cases, is the courts don't have our back. We're looking at a very broken government system. The executive branch is a runaway freight train at this point. We have super blue majority legislatures, unfortunately, in many of these states. And now you've got courts who are not coming out to a right result on this. I mean, the reality is you can't mandate something that's experimental. That's black letter federal law under the Emergency Use Authorization Act. And yet we see these courts saying, oh yeah, I'm going to side with the employer. They can force this vaccine. So the employees are sitting and they're watching, and many of them are quite bright. And they're saying, you know what, we're going to take our chances in court. We're going to fight this battle in court. But make no mistake, that's not the only battle we're planning on fighting here. We are going to start pushing back with grassroots efforts against this tyranny. And when all of the lawyers, from Bobby Kennedy and his group, Children's Health Defense, Simone Gold and her group, America's Frontline Doctors, Lynn Wood, General Flynn, you name it, all of these different folks that I see and talk to on a regular basis, when they heard what was going on at the employee level and what the employees intended to do next week, 100% of them they said, you know what, we are in full support of this move. We believe it's going to be a checkmate move. This is a nationwide walkout that's being organized over a 4-day period starting next Monday. And we back these guys. We back the blue-collar boys, and we back the white-collar folk who are joining with them and saying, not on our watch. Biden may think this country runs when he says jump, but they're going to, I think, show the White House who actually runs this country right now. And that is the good people who go to work every day, earn a paycheck, and are willing to hold the line and say, we're not doing this vaccine, and we're willing to strike over it.
Yeah, we've already seen how powerful the air traffic controllers and pilots and the airline workers are. Even though they try to keep it hush hush and mainstream media downplays it and spins it another direction, it's pretty obvious that the workers are not happy about these vaccine mandates and they're willing to take time off, sick days, whatever they can do to cause damage to the company in the short term. So yeah, it seems like another weapon in our arsenal, a peaceful weapon, would be to be able to do a strike, a walkout. But let's talk about all the options that people have. I definitely support the strike, the walkout. But let's say it come and goes. People are still trying to figure out what they're going to do. They're exploring exemptions, medical exemptions, religious exemptions. Some people get scared and they just resign. Some people get scared and they just get the jab. But let's talk about the other options of the exemptions and of forcing them to fire you and then filing suit.
Well, there's, as you mentioned, a panoply of options on the buffet table here. You can bow down and get a vaccine that you don't agree with, and it's not really a vaccine. We all know that. You can walk off the job. I am, of course, not licensed to practice in most of the states of people who are probably watching me, and this was by no means legal advice. But if it were me facing an unconstitutional mandate that was being trickled down and handed down to me through my employer organization, I would not be making their job any easier by walking off the job. You're not helping a wrongful termination suit happen when you voluntarily walk off the job. You've kind of shot yourself in the foot. You don't have nearly as many theories on which to bring suit. So if you're not of a mind to get the jab, whether it's of your own volition or through coercion, the people I know that I'm talking to are saying we're not going to get the jab. We're also not necessarily going to file an exemption. We're going to make our employer fire us, and we're going to take our chances in court after that. And maybe they win, maybe they don't. They should win. I can tell you that. Everybody should win. I started a speech in Kentucky with Flynn and Lynn Wood a couple weeks ago, and literally the opening sentence of my speech is, the answer is no. And everybody in the audience was looking at me like, what is she talking about? What's the question? And I said, all of the questions that you're emailing me and phone calling me with and voicemailing me about and texting me about every second of the day, and every other attorney no, this is not lawful. No, the administration can't do this. No, your employer can't do this. But the fact of the matter is they are. They're making up the rules as they go, which is a hallmark more of a communist or any sort of other tyrannical regime, and not so much, what we're used to here in America, where we like to think we're living in the home of the free and land of the brave. Or I think I reversed those. It's been a very long day. Pardon me. But anyway, and so the people really need to look at it and go, do I want to give my employer an easy out by letting him fire me, or do I want to make his life harder by staying on the job and making him escort me out and getting legal counsel either prior to that point or during that point to fight my corner with me legally? Or do I want to file an exemption? And of course, there are medical exemptions. In many, many cases, if you have an antibiotic allergy, if you've got a peanut allergy, if you've got allergies to things that are ingredients, I'm not saying peanuts are ingredients, but you get the idea. There are ingredients that go into these vaccines. And if you're allergic to acetone, or you're allergic to ethylene glycol, or you're allergic to MSG, or you're allergic to streptomycin, there are things in the kid vaccines, all of those ingredients, many of those ingredients are in a variety of the different childhood vaccines. I haven't looked to see which of those are necessarily present in the 3 vaccines we have on the market here in America for COVID right now, but your doctor would probably be interested in that. And, if you've got an antibiotic allergy and there's an antibiotic in there, query whether you should be really taking that, and I think that would be something that your doctor and you should discuss. And then my personal viewpoint is, if you file a medical exemption, although I don't think you should have to, we should just live in a free society where you're allowed to go to work without all of these unconstitutional conditions. But if you're so inclined and you file this medical exemption, that's between you, your doctor, and very, very much you and your doctor, and less so you and your employer. What the employer should do at that point is honor the medical exemption if it was written by a licensed professional in your state or elsewhere. And the same is true of the religious exemptions. The U.S. Supreme Court standard is, do you have a sincerely held religious belief? You don't even have to be part of an organized religion. You don't even have to believe in God. You could be agnostic or atheistic. The question is simply, do you have a sincerely held belief against X? And that's really the beginning and the end of the inquiry. So all of these corporate entities that we're seeing with their online religious exemption forms saying, you have to tell us if you have ever had a Skittles or a candy bar or taken Tylenol. What they're trying to do, I think, is trap these employees who are saying, well, I'm Christian, and the basis of my religious objection is it's aborted fetal cell line derived, this new vaccine is. And so what the employer is saying is, maybe you don't know this, but some of the stuff you eat, other vaccines you've had, and other medicine you take is also derived from aborted fetal cell. So if we can get you to admit that you already partook in these other things, then your objection doesn't really have any legs underneath it, because you're picking and choosing. You'll do aborted fetal cell when it comes to eating candy or getting the flu vax, or taking a Tylenol, but you won't do it in terms of this vaccine. So a lot of the attorneys I know, and again, this is not legal advice, and I'm not anybody's attorney here sitting on an interview, but a lot of the attorneys I know are saying, don't play that game. You just write your own religious exemption saying, I have a sincerely held religious belief that prevents me from doing X, Y, and Z, and that should be the beginning and end of it. And if it's not, if it's denied, or your employer is trying to get you into an interactive dialogue with their attorneys, you can just stand on your rights to privacy and bring your own attorney to the interview. But there are many, many options out here, and we're already seeing with this nationwide walkout. And by the way, if your folks don't have the information on it, it's Monday, November 8th through Veterans Day, which is Thursday, November 11th. It's next week, 4 days. You can text the word freedom to 53445. Again, that number is 53445. You text the word freedom to it, and you can get a copy of the electronic flyer, post it all over social media, share it with all your friends and family so they know when it is and how they can participate. But since that flyer, Sean, hit the airwaves and social media beginning of last week, 2 days later, not even a full 2 days, the Biden administration walked it out back. I don't know if you saw that, but I think it was like Wednesday night, give or take. The coronavirus coordinator came out and said, hey, just kidding, that December 8th date for the federal contractors, we're not actually going to be firing employees. That is not a cliff. There's not going to be mass firings. It's a soft date. The lawyers were confused. And then they telegraphed loudly at the end that they absolutely expect a supply line disruption, because they said, and by the way, we don't expect any supply line hiccups. I'm like, I beg your pardon, the heck you don't, or you wouldn't have voluntarily mentioned that at your press briefing. And that thing is the beginning of the end, my friend. We are having this walkout. The blue collar boys timed it well. They know their supply line 2 weeks before Black Friday and Thanksgiving. And when the blue collar boys that make your product and move your product are no longer moving that product across the U.S., enjoy having Black Friday and doing your turkey shopping that week with nothing on the shelves. These guys are playing for keeps. If Biden wants to bankrupt them and their employer wants to bankrupt them, they said, you know what, we're going to one-up you here. We're going to bankrupt you guys and walk the heck off the job before you ever take any more of our freedoms from us. And that, from my humble perspective, yes, you should file lawsuits. Yes, you should follow whatever your heart desires in terms of fighting back legally vis-a-vis your employer, but nothing talks louder than money. No business can survive 50% or more of its staff walking out. And some of these major entities that I am talking about in the supply chain are upwards of 70% unvaccinated, and those guys are not playing ball next week. So I think that's the move. That is the sea change, Titanic, checkmate move we have been waiting for, and I'd like to see how next week shakes out. I think it may change things across the board, frankly.
Well, apparently it's already had an impact if Biden's administration's walking back that December deadline. I just want to return real quick to the exemption forms, because I think a lot of people, because they're not lawyers, they start to overthink things, and they start looking for the perfect exemption form online for their religion or whatever. But what you described is just the simplicity of a sincerely held religious belief, and basically it makes sense to me that if the other side tries to engage you with some kind of dialogue or bait you into, and try to corner you on one of your religious beliefs or whatever, it's better just to refer to the simple statement that you'd already, submitted. Be like, they ask you a question and you just can say, well, I refer to the statement that I submitted, or you have
Yeah.
your lawyer present, and
Yeah.
they can just play that dance as well. So I
Yeah.
really like what you said there. With the knowledge that you're not giving legal advice, and everything. It's just some general knowledge for people to have. So let's get back to the walkout. So this is a hard thing to organize, right? I mean, but luckily you are connected with some very loud people in the country who have millions of people that they're connected to. So how can we get this word out? Because here we are, we're a small network, but we got about 70,000 people who watch these shows, and then they know their family and friends, and it really spreads fast. So how can we get the word out, and how are you already getting the word out?
Well, the thing that we're encouraging folks to do, because you can't rely on mainstream media to cover things, you can't even rely on being able to post things on social media. We are encouraging folks to text freedom, the word freedom, to 53445, because texting so far anyway is pretty bulletproof. Once you have somebody's email or text phone number, you can stay in touch, and we can let them know where rallies are forming in their communities, in their states as the week is progressing next week. We can let them know in advance of rallies that are forming. We can let them know steps that they can take. Hey, if you have a loved one, a spouse, or you are working in these sectors. But I got to say, this started with the blue collar guys. It is expanded way beyond that, and it is a testament. When you see BLM marching across the Brooklyn Bridge, hand in hand, literally, with people who are against the vaccine mandates and have been for years, you recognize that Biden overstepped, and horribly, with this mandatory vaccine business that he's pushing. And ironically, it is this overstepping that has united groups and folks that never played ball together in the past. But I got off the phone with these blue collar guys, and they were 70% unvaccinated, a lot of them. And then I got a call from, employees in the telecom industry, big corporate telecom employers. I then had a call from folks in the aerospace and defense industry, from subcontractors with the military who make and supply weapons, people in local agencies, state agencies, federal agencies. You would be shocked, my friends. These people, again, 30, 43%, 55%, 73% not vaccinated. The news is lying to you. Your employer may be lying to you. We saw Southwest roll it back a weekend ago. They came out and said, oh, golly, yeah, after that Southwest flu virus that went around, their CEO is now saying, literally in the press, we're 53% unvaxxed. Do me some simple math. I am no Einstein here, but tell me how Southwest is going to fly its planes around this country if 53% of its pilots and flight attendants walk off the job. Here's the short answer. They're freaking not going to be able to do that. And the same is true of your employer in your industry. So certain industries, of course, are prohibited by law from striking. Federal law was passed, Congress said, middle of last century. If you're railroad and if you're air, it is so catastrophically devastating when you guys go on strike that you're not allowed to do that until you have exhausted collective bargaining remedies. And so what you're seeing is the pilots unions are coming out saying, we didn't have a strike. We're not allowed to strike. People just got really sick. Call it what you want. Any American with a pulse can read the writing on the wall. And I am not here to tell you should be striking if it is prohibited by federal, state law, or the terms of your contract. But most people in this country do not fall into that category. And I am telling you, not to quote that movie from before I was born, but they're pissed as hell, and they're not going to take it anymore. They are ready to actually, like I said, call Biden's bluff. You want to play a big game of chicken? White House is engaged right now in a game of bluff and a game of chicken. And I am here to tell you that I am putting my money on the workers in this country, because they are about to call that bluff and big. And if they crash the supply chain, so be it. So be it, because at this point, anything is better than seeing our freedom sold out and our country sold to China.
Right, exactly. I mean, this is the cost sometimes of this type of warfare, but it is peaceful warfare, luckily. So let's talk about Southwest, because they said, the CEO went on primetime TV after this came out, and he did damage control. And they put out official statements like, we can officially say that our workers are not having any type of collective action. And I thought that was really interesting because, of course, it's not officially collective action, right? It's
Right.
unofficial. You see, I
That's
saw
right.
at least 3 pictures of "Don't Tread on Me" flags in the cockpits out of the windows of the planes. So these pilots were walking off the job, not officially, right? They just went on sick leave or whatever, but they would
Yeah.
just gave that sign for everyone to see, the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. That's just a signal to everyone. Doesn't matter what the CEO says on primetime TV. This is about our freedom. You know where we stand. You know, a lot of these pilots and air traffic controllers, they're veterans, right? They love our country. They
Yeah.
don't like seeing our country, degenerate into authoritarianism.
Correct. They don't like it. They recognize inherently and implicitly what's at stake. And I flew Southwest yesterday. I was voice texting in the back, waiting to go in the bathroom. A couple of the flight attendants actually came up to me and they're like, "So tell us what's up." And I said, "Are you friendly?" And they're like, "You have no idea how friendly we are." And I said, "Okay, let's chat." But I mean, the workers know the time of the day. Everybody looking at this knows the time of day. We all understand that there wasn't some random storm that affected only Southwest. And I got news for you. You can be in a private plane. A lot of times the politicians, especially in blue states, especially in our White House right now, are fond of making rules that apply to the little people, but not to them. You don't land any airplane without air traffic control. I don't care how rich you are, how many private jets you own. You ain't getting off the tarmac and you ain't landing on that tarmac until you get an all clear sign from the air traffic control. Jacksonville was a hub. Everybody coming out of Europe flies through their airspace, and I am here to tell you, I didn't have foreknowledge of it, but after doing a little bit of digging at the back end of what I saw happening, that place was chosen for a reason. And I had a friend of a friend the other day. Their flight was held up for 9 hours on American when she finally got on the flight. And this is somebody who's on the wrong side of the equation. My friend is on our side. Their friend is not. And their friend was sitting next to a pilot who was deadheading home. And she was like, "Oh, I just don't understand why all these flights are being delayed." And he goes, "Let me tell you why. And by the way, if you think this is over, you got another thing coming. This is the beginning of the what storm. And my suggestion is you don't fly at all between now and Thanksgiving and probably between now and Christmas." So, that's what the pilots are saying. That's what the flight attendants are saying when nobody has got a microphone in front of them on air. So, yeah, is it an official line? No, they're not officially allowed to strike. Is it coordinated? No, it's coordinated. But I got news for you. We are still, to some degree, a free country, and you cannot hold a gun to people's head and say you have to go to work. This is not yet communist North Korea or China, and people have free will. And maybe their contract says they can't strike. I can't tell them that they should. That's advocating illegal action. But neither can I go up to them and say, "You didn't have the flu today. You're supposed to go back to the job," especially when these people are in control of trains, planes, and automobiles. They actually have employee handbooks that say if they're feeling under the weather, they are not supposed to operate large equipment for obvious reasons. You don't want a guy who's feeling kind of bad to get on your Delta flight, stroke out mid-flight, and then crash into the ground with a bus full of 747 passengers. So these guys, if they're sick, are supposed to not go to work. And Fauci, for his part, has predicted quite a bad flu season, I'm hearing. I guess they feel they've beaten the COVID horse to death, so the new thing is going to be the flu. Well, Fauci and friends, be careful what you wish for. That may just backfire on you horrifically when the employees, November 8th through the 11th, decide they're going to take this country back by way of a little economic warfare that they wage back on these people who are making unconstitutional mandates and forcing them down their throat, like their employers, like the guy in the White House right now.
Right. So the goal here, the hope, the objective is that this will affect the economy so much, this will affect the company's bottom line so much that they're going to realize it's just not going to work to try to force this on people, and they'll try to walk back these mandates. So, anything else that you think is important to note besides what I mentioned regarding the goal?
Well, I, all I can say is the guys who have the guts to do this are showing more courage than we've seen all year, with the exception of In-N-Out Burger on my coast. And they need to be supported. If you're remotely a patriot, if you remotely care about this country, if you think that the people who went before us and fought our wars kept us free, and that you've been able to lay your head on a free pillow every night of every day of your life, and you value that, this is your time. You're the hero you've been waiting for. You're the leader you've been waiting for. Freedom is not actually free. It's not something you can go out and buy. It's not something you phone in. It is something you earn every day. And we have forgotten that. My generation down, we are the first generation, my generation down, that has not seen sustained war. I was born at the end of Vietnam, and we have had it quite easy. I'm here to tell you, this is a war. It's an economic war. It is a war on many fronts, and the fact that there are no bombs going off yet makes it all the more dangerous, because people can stay asleep at the wheel and not have to face the reality. This is a war. There are only two sides in a war. You need to pick a darn side. And if you don't pick a side, recognize you still picked a side. You just picked the wrong one. Inaction is still action. And this is unjust. Unjust. This is injustice everywhere. We are seeing it coast to coast, big employers, small employers, from the White House down to the courts that are selling us out and our Constitution out. And you don't just turn a blind eye to injustice. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And if you're working at the docks, if you're working in the middle of Iowa picking corn, if you're doing whatever you're doing and you're like, well, my employer's not mandating it yet, so I'm not really feeling the heat under my back end, so why should I walk off when they're only talking about mandating and they're not mandating yet? I got news for you. Go Google up a poem written by Martin Niemöller at the end of World War II, and it said, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. And then they came from the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me. And by then there was nobody left to speak out. Your job is to speak out. Your job, living in a free society that was basically handed to you and me on a silver platter, is to fight for her, to fight for this country right now. And this is the checkmate move we have all been waiting for 18 months. I think if you believe in God, you believe in your country, you owe it to yourself. Make a promise to yourself right now. Text the number 53445 with the word freedom. Again, write the word freedom and text 53445. Get a copy of the electronic flyer. It has the dates. It has how you can participate. It has everybody who's anybody in this country supporting this action. And it is because every single one of us, from the doctors to the lawyers to all the broadcast journalists, this is like my 30th talk show in the last 3 days. I was on Charlie Ward this morning, Mel K the day before. Everybody, Doug Billings, Ann Vandersteel, John Michael Chambers, everybody is supporting this, because every single person feels the hair on the back of their neck stand up when they go, oh, wow. The blue-collar guys who move our products are walking off the job for 4 days, 2 weeks before Black Friday. I get it. I'm going to support them. The way you support them is if you're so inclined and you're not prohibited by law or contract, you also walk off your job if your employer is mandating the vaccine. You tell 100 of your friends, by hook, by crook, by text, by email, by social media, post it everywhere, get them to participate. This is the move that we need to make. And God bless the boys who organized this. I'm just their microphone. I didn't organize this. I was just bright enough to recognize a good idea already forming up when I saw it. And the fact that this is ordained by somebody other than me was proven when I got off the phone, and my phone kept burning up with employer group after employer group after employer group going, they're mandating it here, they're mandating it there, I'm at a Fortune 100 company, I'm in this state, I'm in this place, I'm in this agency, I'm in this health agency, I control these things for the city, the town I'm in, and they are 100% behind the walk-off. It is a nationwide walkout. It is a stand for freedom, and you got to help support the cause, guys.
This reminds me of an anecdote that I saw on social media of a person who worked for a restaurant in an airport. And so this restaurant owner owned 3 different restaurants in the same terminal. And so he was starting to mandate the vaccines for all his workers. Well, the busboys and the waiters and the cooks, they all got together and said, you know what? If we all just walk off, we can just find a better job somewhere else. I mean, literally 4 million Americans quit their jobs last month because of these mandates and different things. And there's a bunch of jobs open for people that don't require the vax. So what do you really have to lose? And so they did it, and
Yeah.
they walked off the job, and he just texted all of them back and said, you know what? All three of my restaurants are closed. I guess I'm not going to require the vax anymore. You guys can all come back in. So that's just one
Yeah.
story out of many untold stories, because you're not going to hear these stories on Fox. You're not going to hear these stories on CNN. So, but this is unbelievable how many people out there have
Yeah.
not been vaxxed and are not interested in it. I'll give you another example. My mother works for Penn State University. They claimed that they did a poll, and that they polled everyone, and everyone voluntarily told them that they already got the vax. There's like some kind of 99% vax rate at Penn State University. Well, now that my mother has joined all of these different groups, you come to find out that there's plenty of unvaxxed people that are not interested in being required to be vaccinated to be at work, and it's
Yeah.
not even a vaccine. So I shouldn't even use the word
Well, and
vaccine.
right, none of us should be, but and the employers are lying. The government's lying. They're cooking the numbers. This is a bluffing game, and they're like, I know that certain agencies, certain employers, 7 out of 10 are not vaccinated. I know because we've got the plaintiffs and we're moving lawsuits for them, so we know what their math is. And then you've got the employer saying when they're interviewed on TV, the Mockingbird media, oh, we're 90% vaxxed, and then some good employee group like the ones you just described goes, really? Well, we're going to walk off the job, and all of a sudden the employer's like, oh, no, just kidding. I mean, that was Southwest. At the beginning of this, it was all guns forward. And then they had a couple of flu episodes, lost 75, 80 million over 48 hours. And now, come to find out, 53% of their pilots and their flight attendants are either not vaccinated or refusing to state whether they are vaccinated or not. Because frankly, let's face it, that is none of your employer's darn business any more than whether you have diabetes or have an STD or your kid was born with a genetic condition. None of that private medical data should ever be your employer's business. But, we're living in a whole new, brave new world here. But U of Chicago schools, University of Alabama Hospital, all of these places were mandating. And just like your cooks and your busboy story, last week they're like, oh, just kidding. We're not going to fire you all after all on this date. Why? Because they figured they can't keep their doors open with half or more of their workforce gone. 31 fire departments. Somebody just texted me. 31 fire departments in New York were unable to keep their doors open yesterday. They didn't have enough men to man up their crews. I mean, the rubber is really hitting the road. I had a wife of a judge that I know went to get a blood draw. It normally takes the person 20 minutes to get it done. And this is in a major California metropolis. They were there for 4 hours. And when the phlebotomist finally drew the blood, it said, I'm not getting the vax, in the little cubicle. The woman's like, I'm prepared to lose my job over this. And by the way, half of the beds in our ICU and our radiology units and our high-end imaging departments can't even be manned right now. We don't have the staff, and that's before D-Day, where the employer actually has to fire them or not. I mean, they're already hurting. So the people need to understand you have the power. You've always had the power. You just need to allow yourselves to find out who else is in your tribe and not be picked off, not be bluffed into submission by people who are doing just that. They're bluffing, and hold the line. If they hold the line, there's nothing that can happen. Because trust me, this is still a capitalist society, and most of the businesses, whether they're small, medium, or large, are in business to make money, and everybody from Amazon down recognizes they're not going to be doing diddly squat if the blue collar and white collar boys who man up their companies are walking off the job. And I think it is going to be a really interesting week next week. I would definitely do your Christmas shopping and your Thanksgiving Day turkey shopping before November 8th hits. You know what happened to me? I have another story for you. One of my coworkers went to get a new iPhone in an AT&T store. They're sold out in every store nationally right now. She cannot buy an iPhone from that store. It's already bad, and it's about to get much, much worse because Biden just played at a high-stakes poker game that he doesn't have the ability to finish the game on. The blue-collar and the white-collar guys are walking off the job, and the supply chain disruption has already started, but it's about to get manifestly worse next week.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like a perfect storm when we already have a supply chain crisis, and then it's the holidays, and you have this going on. It's just, this is not the time to play chicken with the American people. But this is
Nope.
not the first time that you have picked a fight with organized criminals. You worked in Southeast Asia, stopping human trafficking. Tell me about the techniques and tactics and strategies that are similar that you that you use back then, or working at that problem that you use with this type of problem?
You know, my friend, when you started that sentence, I thought you were going to say it's not your first time fighting organized crime because you've done so much fighting Newsom in your state. I didn't know you were going to finish that sentence by talking about the actual criminal syndicates and mafias in third world countries. But the tactics in holding the line and fighting your corner are not dissimilar. You know, I was raised to be a lawyer and to be polite and being obedient and using traditional methods of dispute resolution when you're living in a first world country. That's what it's about. We were all raised, I think, to be very polite and assume that the cops and the courts had our back. And you're advertising when you roll like that you come from a first world country, because you're basically saying I can trust the systems that are in place to keep us safe. Right now, America is much more like a communist third world country that I work in than she is the country I grew up in. And accordingly, we need to start differing and changing our tactics, our protocols, and what works. I am not advocating violence. I am not advocating a revolution. I'm not advocating anything that's unlawful. But what I am advocating is that we do what works. And what works, whether you're fighting an Asian mafia or you're fighting a dirty elected school board official, is you find out who the ringleader is. This is, by the way, pretty much a Betty Crocker recipe for anybody listening to follow. So sharpen your pencil, write some notes. You find out who the ringleader is. If they are doing something illegal, unlawful, or immoral, here's a little clue for you. It's probably not the first time they've done this. So get to know your enemy. Usually there's one ringleader. Yeah, you might have a board of 3 or 5 people, but there's some single person leading the charge. That is now your focus. And then you get to know him or her better than you know your own husband, your own child, and your own history. And by that I mean, you go research them, or you have retired police detectives who are in your fight with you. Research them. They have access. They know how to do things like, research people, because that's what they had to do, right? When they were on the job, working for the police agencies, working for the triple letter agencies, working as, soccer mom sleuths, whatever it is. And you have them go research your target. And guaranteed that person is going to have done things that are either straight up unlawful or immoral. And your job is to make that known. You cannot take what you find and go to that person and say, you better do what I say or else I'm going to release X, Y, and Z. That is illegal. That's called blackmail. You can't blackmail people. It's wrong. It's bad. You don't want to lower yourself to their level, right? You don't blackmail them. You just release the data you found. So I'll give you an example. Our Orange County health officer was a woman by the name of Nicole Quick. At the beginning of the lockdown, walking into Memorial Day, midnight of Memorial Day weekend on Friday, this is how proud she was of her new job and what she was doing there. In the middle of the night, she released a mandatory mask order for the 3.2 million residents of Orange County, California. That's how proud she was, because, of course, that's when you do things you're proud of, is in the middle of the night going into a holiday weekend. And I didn't know who she was before that time, but I thought, who the heck are you to take a pot shot at my health and say that you're going to create hypoxia amongst millions of people potentially as this hot weather heats up? So we researched her, and what we found, nothing illegal in her history, but I'll tell you this. Her only clinical competency prior to the Orange County Board of Supervisors hiring this idiot to be in a public health position in charge of our health during a pandemic is that she had spent the first 8 years out of medical school in Utah handing out Suboxone prescriptions to people who were trying to get off of heroin, working for her mother's methadone clinic in Utah. So that's right. All she did was hand out one opiate to a guy trying to get off another bad opiate in their time of trouble at her mommy's methadone clinic. And I got to tell you, it wasn't illegal, but it sure didn't play well when I released that little cat out of the bag at my 3 minutes at the microphone in front of the Board of Supervisors. And I told them, I said, you guys fell down on the job. Our state law authorizes you to hire this woman. You had a duty to do some due diligence. Clearly, you didn't do it. And we're not having it. And if she thinks that this is actually good policy and good health law, we are going to play this game of chicken out with her. We're going to go do jumping jacks in front of her house on the sidewalk in 100-degree heat, and you would best pray that when people start passing out from hypoxia due to the masks, that the 30 ambulances can get there in time to revive the guy, because if they can't, I'm going to ask the DA's office to charge it as murder, because that's what it is. And it was a little bit of hyperbole there at the end, but I got to tell you, we had her home address, we had all the goods on who she was. She ran ran out of the middle of that board meeting to go home, pack up her house, and then you never make a threat that you don't play good on. We showed up in front of her house on the sidewalk along with the entire Irvine Police Department. And they came over and they said, you're not allowed. And I said, whoa, boys, I know exactly what we're allowed to do and not. This is the line dividing her driveway from the public sidewalk. And we are using our First Amendment rights, and we are holding signs and chanting what we feel compelled to chant, and that is a lawful, constitutionally protected activity that is not prohibited by state or local law. In my state, we're allowed to be on the sidewalk in front of elected officials' houses, making our voices heard. And then I looked into her video camera and I said, based on the wet, sandy buckets I see, you have little tiny kids. You'd best make darn sure that you're putting those in a mask, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you're going to mask us, you better mask yourself and your kids. And we'll be out here with video cameras to make sure that's happening. And I got to tell you, folks, when you're elected official's husband or wife needs to part the Red Sea of angry protesters on their sidewalk to go get their groceries or to take their child rollerblading down the sidewalk, that is where the rubber meets the road. So you find the person who's leading the charge, you find everything there is to know about them, and you start making it known, and you start hitting them where it hurts. You start hitting them at board meetings with this bad data from their past. You start making it known to their neighbors by protesting on their sidewalks, assuming it's allowed by law. That got more done than any single lawsuit I saw in 18 months in California. And we've done it multiple times, and it's worked every time.
This just reminds me so much of a guest, Christopher Key, that I had on last week, and he just described the same strategy, that you stay peaceful, you never threaten and intimidate any person. That's illegal. That's what the left does. But you're allowed to peaceful assemble. You're allowed to have these conversations and find the people who are actually responsible for these policies and let them know how you feel about it. And possibly take legal action as well. That was part of his strategy, is to make them personally liable for what they're doing.
Absolutely.
We're running out
Find
of
a way to
time.
get them personally
do you have
liable.
any final thoughts about perhaps about the human trafficking relating to this, or any final call to action that you want to mention before we wrap up?
Tyrants are tyrants, whether they specialize in trading children for sex for profit or taking away your freedoms and rights in a first world country. And you treat them the same. You fight every injustice that you hear about always, and you fight it right away with everything you've got, because if you don't stamp it out, it gets worse. Eventually, they will come for you too. Don't be like, oh, it's not my battle. It's my friend. It's not me that's in the hot seat. They will come for you. So we stamp out injustice wherever we find it. And I think America is ready to do just that. When you've got BLM, like I said, holding hands with people who are against the vaccine mandate and have been in the fight for 20 years, marching across the Brooklyn Bridge, when you've got blue collar pairing up with white collar to do a nationwide strike, you can tell this is the move that has united everybody in America. The White House is entirely overreached with this mandate. They need to push it back. They need to roll it back. And if they're not going to do it voluntarily, by golly, we will force the hand of the employer so that they have to do it. And that is what next week is about. Again, text the word freedom to 53445. Get yourself a copy of that electronic flyer so you know what's up. You can participate. You can put it out there on social media. You're the heroes you've been waiting for. Nothing can beat the power of the people when we stand united, and that is what next week is about.
Absolutely, fully support these efforts. I think if I was in the United States, I'm in Brazil right now, but if I was in the United States, I would be doing the same thing. And I'm fully behind this effort. Everyone, go to leighdundas.com, sign up there as well so you can stay in touch. Thank you, Leigh, for coming on the show.